Hi, fourth grade. We're talking about Season of Gifts, Chapter 11, Blazing Pumpkins. You're looking up Afghan and Shut-In. Shut-in is kind of like how we all are now, but we usually think of the elderly when we think of a shut-in. You're listening for or reading for Who Did Ruth Ann Dress Up As for Halloween? What was Newt Fluke trying to do? And why do you think Bobby's mom helped Mrs. Dowdle? Bobby's mom helps Mrs. Dowdle. Interesting. And remember to use complete sentences and capital letters. Okay? And good sentences. This is just because we're not together does not mean you're losing all of your awesome skills. All right, Blazing Pumpkins. Chapter 11. With homecoming behind us, Halloween began to happen 2 weeks early. Soaped windows and pinned car horns and lawn furniture up in trees and dead cats on porches. Unknown hands put a brooder house complete with a flock of hens inside on the railroad tracks. The Norfolk and Western Evening St. Louis train hit it broadside. There was kindling in chicken parts on every roof in town. Trees dripped giblets, and there was hen grit everywhere. Halloween began early, but then so did Mrs. Dowdle. When it came to the future, she was always the step ahead. There were two schools of thought about her. One was that greasing her porch steps or tearing down her privy wasn't a real good idea. On the other hand, nobody had yet dug up her treasure of cash money wherever it was buried. As usual, she seemed to pay no heed to public opinion. She and Ruth Ann even carved a giant pumpkin. They'd scooped it out, baked some pies, and a few loaves of pumpkin bread. Now it stood blazing with candles every night on the Dowdle front steps, daring anybody to knock it off. On Halloween night, Dad took Ruth Ann out to ring a few doorbells and collect some treats. He had calls to pay on shut-ins anyway. For a costume, Ruth Ann wanted to go as an Indian princess, but Dad talked her out of it. In the end, she came downstairs with her trick-or-treat sack, wearing a plaid flannel shirt of mine, her own bedroom slippers, and one of Mother's hats and a veil. "Honey, who are you?" Dad said. "Mrs. Wilcox," she said, crossing her eyes. They left, and I went up to the party at the Grange Hall for 4-H. They gave it to keep us off the streets. It was an okay party with donuts. At least we didn't have to pin the tail on a donkey or bob for apples. Some of the country kids came in for it, and I guess you can't do much Halloweening down on the farm. Jess Wood showed up, and there was some corn silks smoked outside behind the trucks, but a few of the 8th graders started a game that could have ended up with kissing, so a bunch of us went home. Jess did, and he could drive his dad's truck himself. Later that night, there was a thumbnail of a moon, a touch of winter in the hazy air. Phyllis and Ruth Ann were both in bed. Phyllis hadn't gone anywhere, being grounded. Ruth Ann had laid out all her treats she collected to show Rachel. Now she was sawing logs, and I was at my window, still dressed for the party, waiting for whatever would happen next. Something was going to happen. You could feel it in the air. The giant pumpkin glowed on Mrs. Dowdle's front steps. Above the cob house roof hung the glow of a campfire dying down. Anyone trespassing on her melon patch would see a figure humped in Afghans, a shotgun across her knees, sitting guard as promised. Car horns still went off, but far away. Sudden gunfire from right next door would have come as no surprise, of course. It was like Fort Leonard Wood over there. But all was silent until a sudden snap of a kitchen door. A cloud blurred the narrow moon. A large figure crossed the side yard, darker than night except for the white hair. I was downstairs when Dad opened the door. Mrs. Dowdle was on the porch. But how could she be? How could she be, since she was sitting guard in her own melon patch? But here she was, dressed in a complete outfit, save from her dead husband. Canvas coat overalls, gumboots, flap cap, and hunting gear. "Bagged him," she said to Dad. "Call the law." We had a phone now. We had to. People kept calling up Dad to plan their future funerals. When he turned back to make the call, I slipped out. After all, an old lady shouldn't be out at all hours, alone in the dark. The corners of her dim kitchen were crowded with eerie shapes, like severed heads, pumpkins too ugly to sell that she was saving for Thanksgiving pies. "Don't worry," she said over her shoulder. "I got him tied to the leg of the bed." I kept on her heels up the linoleum steps. Her heavy tread rocked the house. Light fell from out of the bedrooms, her grandson's, Joey's. She filled the doorway, and somebody in there yelped at another sight of her. "Turn me loose," a deep, wimpy voice said. "I was just trick-or-treating, that's all I was doing." "With a crowbar and an axe in my upstairs bedroom?" she thundered. "You're looking at doing time, boy, in the state reformatory." The gun hung broken over her canvas sleeve. My heart thudded. Had she nailed him? Had she walked right into her trap? Had he walked right into her trap? Through her unlocked front door past her blazing pumpkin? Had she finally got the goods on Roscoe Burdick? I peered around. There, kicking the bedroom floor on a rag rug between the crowbar and an axe, there was his wrist trussed up beside him and one ankle tied by fishing line to the ledge of the bed. It was Newt Fluke. My heart sank. Mrs. Dowdle had been gunning for Roscoe Burdick, but she'd bagged a fluke. Who sent you on this particular errand?
Nobody, he muttered. I thought it up all by myself.
Yeah, you ain't had a thought of your own yet, she remarked. And you know what you are? You know what you are? Wait, and you know what you are? Newt Fluke dared to say from the floor, though his teeth chattered. There was no heat up here.
You're a darned witch. How come you can be out in your melon patch and up here sitting on this bed waiting for me? How can you be in 2 places at once? You're a...
Boy, she said, I can be in 3 places if need be.
Right about then, we heard the siren on C.P. Snokes' Dodge. I'd kept behind Mrs. Dowdle, trying to be invisible in case Newt ever got out on bail. I was home then before I was missed. From my window, I watched C.P. Snokes cramming Newt Fluke into the backseat of the squad car. Mrs. Dowdle stood in the headlight glare with her fists on her big hips. She looked about half satisfied, and when the car door closed on Newt, she said to the police chief, "There's another one in my snowballs." She crooked a thumb at her own house. Sure enough, another gangly figure exploded out of the snowball bushes by her bay window. He swerved for the road, lighting out for tall timber. They let him go. Around here you can run, but you can't hide. It was Elmo Leeper Jr. He'd been left to stand guard while Newt went in to dig up the bedroom floor. Halloween was finally petering out as the Dodge reversed into the road. I could hear Dad up in his attic study trying to get back to his sermon. It might be Saturday already. Then came a stealthy footfall on the stairs. I cracked my door. Was Phyllis making a break for freedom? But it was my mother. Mother coming up, taking steps. I blinked to be sure. She looked kind of frostbitten, though she was wearing several Afghans. Weirder still, she carried a shotgun broken open over her arm. I couldn't believe my eyes. Mother? Packing heat? Silent as snow, she made for her room, and the door closed behind her. Mother and Mrs. Dowdle working hand in glove? I fell back on the bed, dizzy with what grown-ups can get up to. I drifted off into my usual dream, the one about going down for the 3rd time in Salt Creek, sucking brown water and dragonflies with Roscoe Burdick's heavy hand on my head. But then I slept deeper than the crick into November. Ere the winter storms begin is our next section. See ya!